This program is brought to you by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.
As I think people are aware or should be aware, there's obviously a lot of overlap between traditional oncologic work, care, and research, and hopefully your growing awareness of the importance, as highlighted earlier, in the overlap with palliative care. However, at one level, we still live clinically and often in research more than many of us would like in separate worlds. And so it's really a pleasure for me to visit from my tribe to your collective tribe, to learn from you. And I hope to share with you today a little bit of the perspective from our tribe in palliative care, with an emphasis really on where the overlap is. And I think very much in keeping with what I've heard at the conference today, to highlight opportunities for increasing collaboration. Because I think overall we share very common goals in trying to help people live with cancer. So the objectives, you can read up there. We're going to give you an outline for thinking about the relationship of palliative care research to that of oncologic research. And as I struggled with how to put this talk together, rather than try to hear all the things that palliative care is, can you imagine trying to do an equivalent talk for, say, here, Dr. Leibel, give you came close, but a 50-minute talk on oncology research to people who might not be familiar. It's such an overwhelming task. So I struggled a little bit with how to organize this. And rather than try to lay out all the possible studies or things that are done in palliative care, I decided to focus on a couple of areas, highlighting both micro-level areas of overlap with oncology as well as more macro levels of overlap. And finally, I want to discuss at the end opportunities for oncologic-related research in palliative care. This reminds me a little bit of a slide. It's a little more simple than what Dee West presented the other day in trying to think about the relationship between palliative care and traditional oncology. You recall he had a slide and talked about the Northern California Center showing various things, and I was absolutely delighted to see in one column he actually had palliative care. If you consider traditional oncology, I think you can easily appreciate that there's a range from micro-level research, which may be at the very biochemical or cellular genetic level, to macro-level research such as epidemiologic studies that the Northern California Cancer Center specializes. As Faye suggested in the outline, my guess is you might be pressed to cite similar types of research in the area of palliative care. If you are, I certainly wouldn't blame you. So I'm going to talk about particularly those areas where I see particular overlap between these two fields. One, the well-established fields, really, the nation of tribes in oncology, and now the evolving tribe of palliative medicine and palliative care. Before I do that, let me just kind of give some examples to orient us, and then we're going to talk about, oops, wrong one. You did the same thing, I suspect, right? Okay. Going back, I got it. I'm on a roll now. There we go. So here, obviously, you've heard a lot of talks on basic biochemical mechanisms of cancer and a lot of incredibly exciting things happening at this point in history. What's the equivalent in palliative care where there's not a lot of research or immediate overlap? We have a lot of studies currently going on in the world of palliative care, looking, for example, at the biochemical mechanisms of symptom relief, whether it's how opioids work, opioid tolerance, hyperalgesia, mechanisms of nausea, vomiting, etc., which are absolutely applicable to cancer, but are not necessarily specific to cancer therapy. At the macro level, again, in oncologic research, it's easy to think about prevalence rates for cancers, who gets what is correlation, for example, with ethnicity. In palliative care, we similarly are looking at patterns of, for example, where do people die? What kind of healthcare services do they get? How is access to various forms of care for palliation of symptoms? And then there are areas that we're going to talk about in a minute where there's more obvious overlap. So I'm going to tread with fear and trembling, really, into an area which is not where I primarily work. Most of my work clinically and in terms of research is not at a biochemical level. So I'm probably going to say something that'll make some of you more basic scientists chuckle a little bit. Please forgive me and correct me if I'm not right here. Most of my work actually is in areas of physician education, some work in epidemiology. Some of it actually does relate to cancer. For example, we did a very large study looking at where all veterans in the VA system died.